Thank you for attending my presentation. I'm Hajin Choi from Gwangju Institute of Science and Technology in South Korea. I'll explain a paper called Consistent Post-reconstruction for Progressive Photon Mapping. The content will be given in this order. First, I will give a simple background about the photon mapping. I'll define a problem that you want it to solve, then explain some related works. Contributions of our work will be given after that. Finally, I will show some of the results, then conclude it with limitations and future work. Photon mapping is a famous global animation method that is invented by Jensen. We can robustly render complex visual effects like acoustic because it traces not only the camera rays but also the photons from the emitter, making the complex paths easily findable by the camera rays. Specifically, the photon mapping method collects photons at the hit point X, then estimates the outgoing radius using a corner with radius R. This is called corner density estimation. In this way, it can achieve lower variance than path tracing because photons are shared across multiple pixels. The most famous variant of photon mapping is the progressive photon mapping, which extends the original algorithm into a consistent method. It traces photons, estimates radiance, and then abundance or trace photons to bound the memory usage. The progressive photon mapping is extended to pixel-wise estimator as stochastic progressive photon mapping to cover various stochastic effects like aliasing or depth of field. The problem of SPPM is that it leaves some bias and variance in finite iterations, even though it has a theoretical guarantee of consistency. The bias comes from the process of density estimation, usually at the boundary of geometry or flux changes as shown in the figure. The variance is irrelevant to the density estimation, but comes from the disparate ray tracing at non-diffuse surfaces. There are two previous works that tries to reduce the bias by cleverly choosing the bandwidth of corner density estimation. The adaptive PPM construct an asymptotic MSE of the pixel estimator, then find an optimal bandwidth that minimizes the AMSE. The chi-squared PPM proposes a new idea that the bandwidth can be fixed if the underlying photon distribution is constant. That is, it is optimal not to reduce the corner size for uniform photon distribution because it can get more photons using a large corner. The uniformity is checked by the chi-square test, and if it does reject the null hypothesis, then it reduces the bandwidth heuristically. Both methods successfully reduce the bias by their statistical model, but they cannot remove the ray tracing noise on non-diffuse material because the density estimation does not happen at there. Our method can be used with this method because we consider them as input of our method. There is a post-reconstruction method, the decombiner, which can be used to reduce errors in correlated images like denoised path tracing. It reduces errors by utilizing a positive correlation between the input-independent image and correlated images. It is also possible to use PPM images as correlated input, but this approach is suboptimal because it requires images generated by two distinct methods, that is the path tracing and progressive photon mapping, cutting the time budget by half for each method. Contributions of our method are summarized as follows. The bias in PPM is reduced by utilizing multi-level correlation structures. We generated multiple PPM estimates which contains different levels of correlations by simply varying the initial bandwidth. Then they are combined using the combination corner in consistent way. We use the smallest initial bandwidth as an independent image and others as correlated images. Importantly, our method is consistent because we combine the consistent input. Finally, to reduce errors further, we decorrelate the images by tracing additional ray for the independent image. Let me explain these contributions one by one. The result of progressive Photon mapping is highly dependent on the initial bandwidth. As shown in figure A, the bandwidths with different initial value are decreased as the iteration increases, but the difference between them is maintained. In figure C, the result is noisy, which means high variance, because it has small initial bandwidth. But it is less blurry, which means low bias, especially in the details like acoustics. In figure D, however, the result is less noisy due to the large initial bandwidth, but it is blurrier than the previous one. Optimal bandwidth is dependent on various factors like geometry, flux distribution, etc., and is different across pixels. So single global initial bandwidth is infeasible to produce a high-quality image in finite iterations. Therefore, we propose to combine multiple estimates with different initial bandwidths to generate image with lower error. Here is an overview of our method. We found the multi-level estimates by varying the initial bandwidth. G-buffers and variance of each estimate are also used as input. Then we utilize a neural network to find the best bandwidth among inputs for each pixel. The output weights are used in combination kernel, which will be explained in next slide. The architecture of our network is a fully convolutional network with 10 layers. The last layer has larger channels calculated by multiplication of the size of the local window and the number of input correlated images. Here is the combination kernel modified for our problem. The independent image is now a single ppm rendered image using the smallest bandwidth B1, and the correlated images are rendered using from bandwidth B2 to B5. Note again that the independent image is the noisiest but has a small bias, and correlated images are less noisy but have a large bias. The images are combined using the estimated weights by the neural network in previous slide and are normalized by the large WC. This is a visualization of the output weight W. Figure B is a weight visualization for the smallest bandwidth, and C is for the largest one. As you can see, the figure B has a large magnitude of weight in regions with fine details, for example, acoustics, and has small magnitude for smooth regions like the world. Figure C is opposite to figure B. Through this figure, we show that our trained network can successfully find the best weight from the multi-correlation structures. As I already said, our combination kernel is consistent. That is, it generates the correct solution YC when the iteration goes to the limit. This is because the input BPM images, the Y and Z, converge to the correct solution. For more details, please refer to the appendix of the paper. Another contribution of our work is the decorrelation of rays in input images. We trace one more ray when hit primary non-diffuse material and use it for the independent image. See the Xi and Xj in the last figure. In this way, both independent and correlated images have different noises, making the combination process can downweight one of them. In the right figures, the results show that decorrelating makes a huge improvement, especially for the spiky noise. Here is the experimental setup for our paper. We used NVIDIA RTX 3090 and TensorFlow version 2. Our dataset consists of 1,800 training frames, and it takes approximately 16 hours for 100 epochs. Test is done for both SPPM and CPPM. For fair comparison, we used bidirectional path tracing instead of plain path tracing for the input to the previous post-reconstruction method. This is the bookshop scene, which contains many diffuse and glowy surfaces. Most of them are lit indirectly by several lights. The teapot has a closed material which shows many spiky noise in the result of SPPM and CPPM. Our method can successfully remove those errors by combining multiple pixels from multiple images. In shadow regions, PPM method generates bias due to the wrong bandwidth in finite iterations. Our method, however, can choose a best bandwidth from a set of images with different initial bandwidths. It not only smooths the noise but also sharpens the high-frequency details, for example, the edge of shadow. Here is the pool scene containing glossy brown at the sides and a pool with caustics at the center. In the results, our method makes the edge of caustic sharper and removes noises in caustics. At the glossy surfaces, our method removes noise and recovers the shadows. Here is the water caustic scene, consisting of highly complex caustics due to the point-light sources and complex geometry of water. As the bidirectional path tracing completely fails to compute the caustics, the previous post-reconstruct method also fails to capture the caustics, whereas our method successfully reconstructs the input SPPM, generating sharper results along with small numerical errors. Here are comparisons of our method with the PPM method in equal time. Our method substantially improves the SPPM and CPPM method in test systems as given in the right table. This is a comparison with the previous post-reconstruction method. It shows improvement over 3 of 4 scenes and got comparable result in the third scene. For our method, we should conduct 4 more radius estimations and 1 more ray tracing compared to the original PPM method to generate 5 input images. Still, however, our method shows moderate overhead ranging from 10 to 30% because we share the Photon map for all input images. There's a limitation in our method because inherent dependency of our method on the input PPM method, for example, CPPM, we fail to reconstruct high-quality images if the input method produces low-quality images. Therefore, possible future work will be the control of bandwidth of PPM itself, considering our post-reconstruction process. The training and test codes are available online. Please refer this link. We give acknowledgments to the anonymous reviewers for the recommendations of additional analysis. We are also thankful for the grant from funding agency of our government. Finally, we really appreciate the following scene makers that we used in our experiments. Thanks for listening to my presentation. Any questions would be appreciated.